The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Year after year, generation after generation, we as Americans enjoy the right and opportunity to let our voices be heard through the election of our governing officials. With over 200 years of peaceful transition from one elected body to another, the stability of America's republic stands alone among nations. Our founders pledged their life, their fortune, and their sacred honor in the establishment of this nation. Our country's founding documents have guided this nation and are the substance by which today's laws are judged. Do you own a copy of the Constitution? Documents of Freedom is a pocket-sized booklet containing the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all other amendments passed. The booklet also features the Declaration of Independence and Washington's Farewell. Documents of Freedom is available for a donation of $5 or more to VCY America and can be made by calling 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk. Today we're visiting with Joe Farah, the founder and chief executive officer of WND. Previously known as WorldNet Daily, now made it a lot simpler to get at, WND, and if there are issues that are happening and the attacks on our faith, the attacks on Christian principles, and covering a lot of news, a lot of secular news is out there too. Things are happening in our country. But the question is, well, was it not the Bible tells us about in Ezekiel 33 and the watchman on the wall? And if there's ever a time when we need to be on the ball and on the wall, it'll be now. Well, Joe, back to you here. Again, Jerry has been for some time now dealing with this issue of the birth certificate. And, of course, anybody that deals with it is sneered at and called a birther.
Yeah, and that we didn't anticipate when we began these investigations almost 4 years ago now during the campaign. Because, again, we figure, look, if you're pursuing truth and you're looking for, answers to, you're looking for answers to questions, how can you be criticized for that? The fact of the matter was that Obama was hiding virtually every single document from his whole life, from his school records, medical records, birth certificate, draft cards, Social Security numbers, the whole nine yards. And Jerry pursued this, and he pursued it in a book that came out last year called "Where's the Birth Certificate?" And before that book ever hit the bookshelves, it rose to become the number one best-selling book in the country on Amazon in pre-sales. And it was actually the very day that book soared to number one that was the day, according to a account in the Washington Post, that Obama decided he had to release his birth certificate. Well, we didn't jump to any conclusions when we saw that document. We hired a bunch of forensic analysis to look at it, and we concluded that it was 100% bogus and fraudulent. And finally now we have Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Maricopa County, Arizona, who has done, believe it or not, the first law enforcement investigation of this issue, and his team came to the same conclusion. It's not only a fraud, but it's a rather bad fraud, pretty obvious one. And still, with all of that evidence out there, Vic, we have 99.9% of the media in this country ridiculing us, ridiculing Joe Arpaio, refusing to, if they attend his press conference, it's to put him on the spot rather than to get, elicit the information that his 6-month investigation actually came up with. And so we're in kind of strange times, when the press, which is supposed to be a watchdog on government, is actually out there serving in kind of a public relations or propagandistic role for the government and for the political establishment. And that's kind of what we try to stand against here at WND.
You know, and to know that the news is controlled, and I'm going to say this, I have great appreciation for Sean Hannity and some of the people that are on Fox. However, we also know that there are those in high-ranking areas who say, if you want to have the show, you do what we say, and they shut it off.
And we know, for instance, at Fox, which, many conservatives turn to as, what they perceive to be an alternative to the rest of the press, we know that at Fox, the memo has gone out that you can't talk about this issue of eligibility. The last time I was on, I wasn't planning to talk about this. I was on to do political analysis after one of the primaries, and I was going to be on my best behavior and just deal with the questions that were asked. However, when Sean Hannity suggested that Marco Rubio was the de facto vice presidential nominee, no matter who was the presidential candidate, I said, but there's a problem there, Sean. He's not eligible. And that was the last time I was invited to be on Fox. Now, Jerry, I got even a better story. Jerry was specifically asked to be the first guest on a new show that Fox launched several weeks ago with Mancow, and it's a weekend show. And Mancow specifically asked him to talk about the issue of eligibility. He hadn't gotten the memo because he was brand new there at Fox. And as soon as the producers discovered what was planned, they said, no, you can't have him talk about that. So Mancow decided, okay, well, he can talk about some other things. And ultimately, they withdrew the invitation. Now, this was the guy that Mancow thought was the very first guest he should have on his very first brand new show on Fox. And yet Jerry hasn't been on Fox for, I don't know, a lot longer than me. And it's simply because they do not want this topic broached. And you have to ask yourself, what is so dangerous about talking about facts? And the facts are that the birth certificate's a fraud. There are problems. We just found out recently, Vic, that they changed. We did a story about his draft card, and within 4 days of our story, they destroyed the draft card and a whole bunch of others. And Sheriff Arpaio now has put in a demand to preserve the microfilm versions of this because they're really destroying evidence.
Well, no, I've got a copy that came through the Washington Times, I believe it is, showing the draft card, or the alleged draft card, should I say. But it shows Barack H. Obama signing the thing. It's got July 29th. Is that 80? Yeah.
1980, yeah.
Yeah, July 29th, 1980. Is this legit, or has somebody been creating, photoshopping a new card?
That's what Sheriff Arpaio wants to find out, because there are questions that have come up in his investigation, and all he did was ask for a copy of the draft card. What could be the problem with such innocent documents? Well, you go back to the birth certificate. For heaven's sake, you can't register your kid for Little League or for school without producing birth certificates. But yet, we don't have a system set up in this country to ensure that constitutional qualifications like natural-born citizenship are actually enforced. That was the alarming thing for me. It really wasn't about Obama so much. It's a breakdown in our constitutional system. If we're not going to take something as seriously as, presidential qualifications, and by the way, the Constitution isn't that strict about it. I mean, 35 years old and a natural-born citizen. If you can't qualify that way, I mean, there's definitely a problem. We still don't know to this day whether Barack Obama is qualified. But what we do know is he has gone way out of his way not to provide any evidence to demonstrate that he is.
Which makes it even more mysterious, like the fellow from Russia when he first came in. I forget who it was, a Russian made the comment and was quoted or printed, said this was a mystery man that had become the president.
Yeah, even after having served for nearly 4 years in office, it's amazing what we don't know about this president's life, because he wrote an autobiographical book that many people have poured through, and there are so many holes in it. And even recently, he has had to admit, well, there wasn't such a person as that girlfriend I talked about. That was a composite figure of girlfriends I had.
One of those dreams of his father and
exactly.
and others. Well, Joe, let me say this. There are so many people that appreciate your news service, and there are scads of things we should talk about here today. But one of the things I think would be helpful, I remember years ago, I did a program with Charles Stanley, and we were on Crosstalk. But he sat down in the studio with me, and then I said, well, folks, normally we would have Dr. Stanley talk to us and say, now listen, and he would tell us. But I said, now, Dr. Stanley wants you to listen as we open the microphones. And for the next hour, people called in to let him know what a ministry they'd had from his ministry. But I know there are thousands of people that read your WorldNet Daily out there as well. And I'd like to open these lines, if it's with your approval. And
Nothing I like better.
And
except talking to you, of course.
Well, we're going to open our lines right now, 800-733-9829. And if you're a reader of WND or WorldNet Daily, give just about a 30-second statement, as many as we can cram into the rest of the program, and let Joe know how important you feel what he is doing for America. Our phone number again, 800-733-9829. The lines are now open. And if you'd like to call in, you're welcome to do so as you dial. It's toll-free from anywhere on the planet. It's 800-733-9829. And the lines are starting to light up here all over the board here. Joe, you have a continuing... So how many staff people do you have working on this?
Well, we have 25 full-time editorial employees and quite a few contractors or freelancers, and of course, I mentioned the 48 columnists, all of whom are either voluntarily writing or are under contract. We have about another dozen or so full-time employees who are not outside of the editorial area, and we have beyond them dozens and dozens of contractors. We have whole sections of our business that are contracted out, like our e-commerce operation. So it's become quite a big organization over the years.
Well, that's great.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.